Thanks, Derek. Hello, everybody. Well done for lasting the day. I was asked by Steve Scafardi, our head of events, so he said, for future brands, I was here last year with a couple of CMOs, he said, have you got any ex-client CMOs who will come and talk to us about what it's like being a CMO? And I thought really long and hard. Then I bumped into David in the street and I said, are you free? Yeah, so and he was. So after plied him with some expensive alcohol. And then we realised that actually, if you are a budding CMO out there, and I know there's a number of marketing managers, online e-commerce people who actually are probably aspiring still to go up the greasy pole to marketing director and CMO, then David really does have the CV to die for. And he was my client many moons ago, my agency days. Before that, he was actually agency himself. And he's gone on to work for some fantastic brands, including Go Airlines, the low-cost airline of British Airways, plus he worked with The Guardian, and most famously he worked on the bid for the Olympics and also the World Cup. So one win, one loss on his credit there. So we'll do a whiz-through tour of that, and what we'll try and do is pick up some lessons on the way as to why he became such a good marketing director or the head of marketing, what strategies he actually deployed in those various roles, and some of the challenges, hurdles and failures on the way, because as we all know, it's not an easy route to success. The career we've all chosen is a hard one, but that's why lots of people want to do it, because it's interesting and diverse. And David has had certainly an interesting and diverse career. So welcome, David. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We'll start with your first photo. Your first photo, why have we got a picture of the Forth Bridge?
Of the Forth Railway Bridge.
The Forth Railway Bridge on the screen when we're talking about marketing and future CMOs.
Yeah, well, this was a big moment of inspiration for me. I did an engineering degree. My first job was up in Scotland working for Shell, and I went down to. I was working in Aberdeen, and I went down to Edinburgh for the first time, and I went to have a look at the Forth bridges, and they're quite amazing structures. But I had a sort of a moment. I stood on the shores of South Queensferry, which is just where the rail bridge comes across, looking across, and it's 1.5 miles across the choppy waters of the Firth of Forth, and it just struck me that about 100 years earlier, someone else had stood there, and there hadn't been any bridges, and they thought, oh, I know, why don't we build a bridge across here? And it struck me that sort of big projects need two things. It kind of needs someone to go, I know, let's put a man on the moon, or I know, let's build a bridge across here. And secondly, then thinking, well, why couldn't that be me? And so that kind of crystallised the moment when I thought, actually, there's nothing to be scared of going for big projects.
Big projects.
Yeah.
Fundamental decision making. I think that was the three words that you used with me. So fundamental decision making, took you to an engineering degree. It took you then, to Oxford, and you decided with that wonderful education that the British taxpayer pay for, you'd get a job where?
Well, for Shell, you mean, or
yeah. So from Shell.
Yeah. Then I went into advertising.
Yeah. Talk us through that fundamental decision.
So
why did you give up the engineering? Why did you stop wanting to build bridges and decide to create ads?
Yeah. It's a bit weak, really.
Really weak. Yeah.
I mean, I liked advertising.
Were your mum and dad proud at the time?
Yeah. No, they weren't actually. I mean, I'd done this degree in engineering, and then I'd become a system, what you call today a business process analyst for Shell, which is all about sort of systems thinking. And it's definitely served me well in the latter stages of my career. But at the time, I found it dull. It didn't seem to have any human aspect, and I just loved ads, and so I joined a Scottish ad agency, and then eventually moved back to London, where I joined Ogilvy and worked on a car account forward.
So I love the fact you worked on Shell and a car account, and then also at the Guardian later. So of course, they probably wouldn't have you anymore.
Wouldn't have me anymore, no.
Yeah. So and that's when you and I first met, when you were at Ogilvy, and you were running the incredibly sexy full dealer account. So I always wanted to work on car accounts because that was where the big money was and stuff like that. But you worked on the dealership account, which was the bit that no one else wanted to do. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't sort of understand how car accounts work, they're sort of, at the top end, we called it tier one. There's the brand advertising and then the model advertising, so the individual cars. At this time, this was like the Mondeo and the Focus and the Fiesta and so on. And then tier two was the dealer advertising, which was promotional advertising, so it was very retail-y, and it was on behalf of regional associations of dealers like London Ford dealers, Southwest Ford dealers, Scottish Ford dealers, and so on. It was sort of quite dirty, but not as dirty as what was called tier three. And tier three was the individual advertising that dealerships were doing in their local newspapers, in their local yellow pages, the kind of, sort of leaflets through the door. And I put together a proposal. I mean, this wasn't just like a written document. I made a whole pitch to Ford and to dealers and to the agency that as an agency, Ogilvy should take on the tier three advertising.
And the creative director liked that decision?
They absolutely hated it. I can't. So on the plus side, the billings that I was responsible for jumped from 20 million a year to 30 million a year overnight. So it's a 50% increase in billings, and this was at 15% commission. Can you remember those days?
Yeah.
So the finance director loved me, and indeed that was what precipitated my appointment to the board of Ogilvy. But the creative, and at the time the creative directors were Per, Clive and Jerry, hated this, hated me, and this was 10 Cabot Square, so the sort of agency was arranged in a sort of donut shape with an atrium in the middle. And every time I walked past their offices, every time they saw me, they'd shout out, "Wanker," really loud. And I had to remember when going for client meetings to go the long way round to the meeting rooms. Otherwise, it didn't matter if I was with a client, they'd still shout out "Wanker" every time.
But the fundamental decision made the company a lot of money. We talked, there was some sessions earlier talking about business decisions and following the money, and that was where you followed the money.
Absolutely. And at the time, the profit from what I was doing was greater than the profit of the agency. So everything else collectively was losing money.
Yeah. And this is splurring both our blushes. Not 25 years ago. Maybe the analogy now is those doing brand and those doing performance, where performance marketing is seen as the money-making sales operation, and brand advertising is now seen as a fluff.
Yeah,
so, do you think you would be a performance marketeer if you would?
I would be, for sure. Yeah. Just the whole data side of it, the behavioural side of it fascinates me. I've enjoyed the brand side. I know we're going to talk about London.
Let's have a look at the second picture, because I think. Could you click the second picture? Because I've forgotten my clicker. Someone upstairs for me. Thank you very much. There we are. That's where you and I work together as agency and client.
Yeah.
The low-cost airline from British Airways.
That's right. Sadly, it doesn't exist anymore. It got acquired by EasyJet, and it was. Oh God! I mean, when we started this, BA were thinking about whether they should get into the new sector of low-cost airlines. There'd been a change in regulation, so I've been lucky enough when a change in regulation permits a new entry into the market, and BA wanted to examine whether they should participate, and if so, should they buy an airline or make an airline. They concluded, or rather we concluded, I was part of the project team, that they should participate, and the answer was to make an airline. And then I got invited, so I was working at an agency called Hal Henry, which doesn't exist anymore at the time, but I got invited by the person who was then my client if I wanted to become one of the founders of the airline. So I left the agency and became a founder of the low-cost airline Go, which we then set up.
And as sales and marketing director, was that all the dreams you'd made of? I remember that beautiful office you had in Stansted, corner office overlooking,
the tarmac. I mean, I had no idea because this was now the first time that I'd been agency side, but now I was responsible for sales as well as marketing, and I'd never understood when I was running the bits of the Ford business. I couldn't think why the Ford marketing director would turn up late for a meeting. It was like, well, why? How could there possibly be anything else that you're doing other than worrying about the advertising and the media plans and so on? And you know, it doesn't take long to realise that in fact
you were quite busy.
I was quite busy, and you could only spend about an hour a month thinking about the advertising. And of course, perishable inventory like airline seats, it's relentless. We were flying 364 days a year, and if the plane takes off with the seat empty, you've lost the chance to sell it forever. So you've always got to be.
That comes onto my favourite top when someone who worked for you rang someone in my team to say this was, I think, 24 hours after 9/11 to say, yeah, we need to start advertising again, which I believe is one of the fundamental decisions that you and the team made. At the same time, the British Airways team, in the other side of the agency, had been told to pull all advertising for the next 12 months, and your team were telling me to book ads in newspapers to sell seats. Yeah,
that was quite a courageous decision, I think. And as a management team, the leadership team, we developed. It was my suggestion. We developed this idea of having 3 trust me's a year, where you could say to your colleagues, without having to go through the whole business of like a really complex business case or a long argument, you could deploy a trust me, which was unless they thought it was an utterly insane idea, that they would go along.
Was this an idea of yours, an idea of?
Yeah, no, I sort of suggested the technique, and
so
then
you suggested it to Barbara.
Yeah. Not at this time. Fortunately, I'd logged the idea a little bit sooner. And then, as you say, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, a lot of flights were grounded for 36 hours, I think. And then, as the airline business started getting back, all passengers were staying away, and we were hemorrhaging money. And by this point, we'd done a management buyout, and so we all had sort of skin in the game. And I'd invested roughly to the tune of the mortgage. And so getting really quite worried that actually we were facing, that we'd go into liquidation. And that what it required, though, was to get people flying again. And, although terror incidents are terrible, people do move on. And, at the time, we didn't sort of have the concerns about climate issues and so on, and so I thought that if we were aggressive on price and promoted aggressively, given all the other airlines, as you say, British Airways decided to abandon all their marketing for 12 months, other airlines had pulled out, Ryanair weren't advertising, EasyJet weren't advertising, that there was an opportunity for us to basically have 100% share of voice. And so we doubled down. I seem to remember your advice was to just wait another 24 hours.
There were still pictures of planes in buildings, I think was my exact quote.
Yeah. It was possibly a little early, but we were fast.
It was again, for me, one of the bravest decisions I've ever been part of, and it paid off. So
we were first out of the gate.
So the valuation of Go when you bought it from BA was we were given £25 million by British Airways, which was the capital with which to start Go. And then when British Airways sold Go to a private equity firm called 3i, they sold it for 100 million. So that was 3 years later. So they effectively quadrupled their money, and they were very happy. And that was the point at which we got involved as part of the management team. And then 3i sold it to EasyJet for
374 million 9 months later. So it almost quadrupled in value again. And
where are British Airways in low cost these days?
So, well, I mean, at the time, I can remember there was a piece in the FT, and it just basically said, "Did Rod Eddington sell the wrong airline?" Because in fact, British Airways was worth less than Go at that point.
Point in time. A very good success story. There's a good success story which leads us on to your celebrity claim to fame. So as an airline boss, you obviously met lots of celebrities, and then you went on to meet some more. So if we look at picture 3, we've got you.
Oh no, this is the London 2012. This is the London 2012 thing, which comes before the one where...
Oh, right. So this is, you weren't, so 2012, you went from Go to 2012.
So what happened?
And this is what, 2005?
Yeah, that's Trafalgar Square on the 6th of July 2005. This was the day before the London bombs.
So Go, EasyJet, how did you go from there to get approached to do 2012?
Right, that's sort of nepotism, that one, because Barbara...
Sort of nepotism. Sorry. Everyone learned that. In order to succeed, there's sort of nepotism.
So my chief executive at Go was an American businesswoman called Barbara Cassani, and she was given the job of chair of London's bid for the Olympic Games. She only held the role for just under a year and resigned, and Seb Coe took over. But when she started, it was a startup. She needed somebody to help set up the company. It was a separate limited company. And because she and I had set up Go, I think there was a certain element of trust. She asked me
following your boss on that occasion.
Following my boss.
So making sure you have a boss that trusts you.
Yep.
Yeah. And if they get a good job, follow them into that good job.
Exactly.
Good advice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
the 2012 story was an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a new business pitch. You get 100 weeks as a city. You have to sort of submit all kinds of technical proposals where the stadium are going to be, how you're going to do the transport, the accommodation for athletes, and so on. And then, and there's an evaluation commission, so they are eliminating cities along the way based on them failing to meet technical qualifications. Don't have enough hotel rooms, or you can't. Yeah. It's too far. That sort of stuff.
So anyone could have won for London. Any good marketing director could have won for London. But why did you? So what was the difference that you made?
So what? It gets to a point where there's a shortlist, and the shortlisted cities are invited to make a presentation. And so now the presentations happen just before the final vote at the end of the 2 years. And it was just, I put the presentation together. Going into this, Paris were the favourite, and they'd got a higher score from the evaluation commission. Paris, then Madrid, London and New York, and Moscow at the bottom. We were almost second bottom in terms of technical evaluation. And the French had decided, because their technical bid was so strong, they made a presentation about the strength of their technical bid and why Paris would be such a great city to host the Olympic Games. And indeed it would be. And indeed in 2024 it will be a brilliant city to host the Olympic Games. And in much the same way that in advertising you kind of think about reframing the problem, I thought we shouldn't even play on that territory. There's no point in trying to argue that we would host a great Olympic Games.
So the London USP became what?
So we moved it to legacy. We shifted the conversation to legacy, and we made an argument that the challenge that faces the Olympic movement is about attracting young people into sport. London's a particular kind of city that holds an appeal for young people, and by association, if you stage the games in London.
So the fundamental decision that you made was to move from what is here today to what was actually left after the game again.
Yeah,
I think
basically try and change the decision criteria. To say to people, don't think of this as a decision about which is the best city to host the games. Think of it as a decision about which city has the vision that best serves the future of the movement. Yeah. And it was the vote. There's 100. It was 52-50. It's the closest margin.
It was a fantastic success story. Let's move on. And that got you a job where?
It's a fantastic. Before you
look, 3 minutes. You've got to talk faster.
Okay. Sorry, but I
next picture, please. Yeah.
Next picture. Okay. So then we decided
to top right-hand corner. You'll see.
That's me photo bombing. So we decided we'd try and do it again. These guys, the Three Lions, as we call them, to try and win the 2018 FIFA World Cup bid. That was a humiliating failure.
Yeah. When did Moscow come with the Olympics bid?
They came last.
Yeah, and where did they come in the World Cup?
They came first. In fact, yes, they held the World Cup.
What was their strategy, or can't you say?
On paper, their strategy was to say, right, Russia's the largest country in the world. The World Cup has never been there. You can leave a legacy of brand new stadia and a whole new consumer market. They had a very strong story.
And so,
I'm not getting into the bribery and corruption.
We won't mention the bribery and corruption. Right, okay. So, but what lessons do you learn from failure? I always say to people, look, what, so that...
Oh, this was without doubt the most valuable, not that particular moment, but...
Well, let's have a look at the next moment.
Oh, the next moment, okay.
The next moment, yeah.
So you can see...
There's someone looks quite happy there. Is she Russian by any chance?
Oh, I've got to say, so you can see Prince William there, and there's Beckham, and I'm next to Seb Coe. That's Hugh Robertson, who's the sports minister behind me. And this is the exact moment, okay, when Russia discover they win. And that is what the face of dejection and failure looks like. And you can't see him, but because he's hidden behind the guy just along there. But Roman Abramovich is sat 3 away from me, and Seb's a fan of Chelsea. So Roman Abramovich came across to shake Seb's hand in a sort of commiseration, and because I was between them, he offered to shake my hand, and I refused to shake Roman Abramovich's hand, and I imagine that he's really cut up about it, even to this day. Yeah.
So, but a lesson from failure, was that a failure of strategy, or was it a failure of just...
So there was really 3 things. We focused on the technical bid too much. We were worried that that people would think that it was a shoo-in because we've got great footballing infrastructure. There was nothing we needed to build. We're already well experienced. I mean, most people don't know, but a FIFA World Cup final is actually a slightly smaller event than the FA Cup final at Wembley each year. So it was, we could host it with our eyes closed, but we didn't want to come across as complacent. So we put a lot of effort into the technical bid, too much effort. We did not have good relationships. There's a long and antagonistic history between England and FIFA. I mean, it dates back from when England refused to participate in the first 3 World Cups through to us backing opponents of Sepp Blatter twice in a row. The resentment towards the Premier League.
If you could do it again tomorrow, what would you do differently?
Do you know, and the FA is thinking about bidding for 2030, and I've had a chat with them, and I think whilst China might bid, if China bids, don't bother bidding, because, but we had people like Beckham and Bobby Moore who we could deploy, but there was nobody like Franz Beckenbauer or Michel Platini, sort of the equivalent of a Seb Coe in football. So we had poor relationships, we didn't have a strong, recognised, credible bid leader. And then, in fact, like I say, the argument that Russia used about being the largest country that never hosted it was one that was difficult to beat.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go. Okay. We'll do one more question. Just to say, again, the one lesson for, again, lots of marketeers, lots of young brand people are there. So one lesson that goes across that whole fundamental decision maker, I could sum it up as being brave. But actually, as an engineer, your process mind might do it in a different way.
No, I think that's right. I think sort of being prepared to make a courageous decision, and it's fine now because I'm sort of coming towards the end of the career, and there've been enough sort of good moments that offset the couple of I think if 2018 had come first, it rather screws you up, and it would reduce your appetite for risk. I've been very lucky in that I was able to build on some successes which gave me increasing confidence, and so much so when you encounter, a bit of a bump in the road, you can recognise it and lessons, and it doesn't throw you. So, yeah, I wouldn't say there was anything cleverer than that.
Nothing cleverer than that, but be brave. Be brave. All right, please join me in thanking David.